Story structure. Any story you tell, no matter the medium or the length or the style or the genre, no matter the story, it has a structure. There are multiple story structures. Part of the craft of being a storyteller and a marketer is that you learn the story structures so that you can tell an effective story. So your story has an emotional impact, has some action, and is exciting. That way, the audience, the consumer, will be engaged. There are multiple story structures, dating all the way back to Aristotle and his Poetics, all the way through current modern structures like the Save the Cat structure. Again, the structure you use is not as important as the fact that you are using a structure so that your story has a clear beginning, middle, and end, and your main character goes through some kind of journey, some kind of transformation. That way, your audience will invest themselves in your story and see some of themselves in your main character. One of the most common story structures was identified by Gustav Freytag, a theorist who based his model on Aristotle's Poetics. This is one that is taught a lot in high schools. It takes you through a story arc that looks like a pyramid. It starts off with the exposition or the setting of the story. There's some kind of incident that incites things to happen, causes things to happen, so that the main character leaves his world and journeys on to a world that is new. As he's going through the journey, there's obstacles along the way, and this causes the action of the story to rise. It keeps rising until finally there's an obstacle that the protagonist has to overcome. At that time, the highest level of energy, the climax, we kind of know what the protagonist is going to have to do in order to solve the problem. He starts to do that, and that launches us into the falling action of the story. As he's going through the falling action of the story, he's working out all those final details until finally there's a resolution where he resolves his conflict and everything's tied up in what's called the denouement. This gives us a new world free of chaos where the character has grown based on what he has learned. In this course, we're going to spend a lot of time looking at another transformational structure called the hero's journey. This was started by Joseph Campbell, who looked at myths and saw that most myths had an underlying structure called the monomyth. It's a very good structure for storytelling and transformational storytelling. Another structure that we'll be looking at is the modern three-act structure, which is used for most films and TV shows that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. In the course, we're going to give you a lot of tools so that you can analyze stories for structure, and you can also plan your own stories using these structures. One of these is a story map. A story map is a graphic organizer that helps you plot out the events in your story so that you can come up with some kind of visualization as to how your plot looks. Some of the terminology on the story map that you need to know are things like character, which is the person or thing we're following through the story. The setting, that's where and when the story takes place. Once upon a time, not so long ago, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. The rising action, which is when the action starts to build, it's leading up to the climax. The falling action, that's the action after the climax. The climax, which is the point of most chaos or the most energy in the story. The conflict, which are the struggles that the main character or protagonist has that he has to overcome. And the resolution, which is the removal of the conflict. Finally, the theme of the story is the moral of the story, the message of the story, the universal premise that the story is trying to address. So now that you know the terminology, you should try to take that story map and use it to plot out one of your favorite stories. It's easier to do something that you're really familiar with, like a fairy tale, or your favorite hero story, or an episode of Friends, whatever. Something that you're really familiar with, that you know the plot, you know what happens in the story, and you can write them down in order. Then you can look back and see what the structure of that story actually was. Again, all this is so that you become better storytellers, so that you can use that ability to become great marketers and great storytellers.